Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a really fascinating, and let's be honest, pretty unconventional theory about biblical history and prophecy. It's a theory that challenges, well, just about everything, from the number of ancient temples to the very location of Jerusalem itself.
So the source material really kicks things off with a central puzzle. It claims that the specific phrase, third temple, is nowhere to be found in Scripture. So, if that's true, where does this hugely popular idea even come from? All right, let's get into it.
To track down that answer, the source says we have to go all the way back to the timeline of the temples themselves. The argument is that a simple, centuries-old miscalculation, a miscount, has completely thrown off our understanding of biblical prophecy. Now we start with the timeline that's pretty familiar, right? King Solomon builds his incredible first temple, it gets destroyed, then Zerubbabel steps in to lead the building of the second one. But right here, on this timeline, is where the whole theory introduces a key player, who, they argue, changes the entire count. You see, the whole argument really hinges on the account of the historian Josephus. The source we're looking at highlights that, according to Josephus, King Herod didn't just, do a little renovation on the Second Temple. No, he supposedly demolished it, stone by stone, right down to the very foundation, and then built a brand new, way more glorious structure in its place. So here's the absolute crucial point. This theory identifies Herod's temple as the actual third temple. It wasn't a remodel, it was a total replacement. And if that's true, it means any modern-day talk about building a future third temple is actually based on a fundamental miscount. Okay, so once the temple count is reestablished in this theory, things pivot from the question of when to the even more radical question of where. The thinking goes something like this. If our history is wrong, what if our geography is wrong too? And this is where the argument really takes a turn. The theory flat out proposes that the true biblical Jerusalem isn't in the Middle East at all. Instead, it's Salt Lake City, Utah. So let's take a look at the evidence they present to back up such a huge claim.
So the source points to this kind of geographic data. First, it points out that the Salt Lake Temple literally sits on a location called Mount Moriah, which perfectly matches the biblical name. Then it contrasts the elevations, arguing that Salt Lake City, way up in the Wasatch Range, fits the description of a temple built high in the mountains much better than the site in the Middle East.
But how could a location this important possibly be hidden in plain sight in America? Well, the source tries to answer this by connecting its theory to another one, the idea of a lost, technologically advanced global empire known as Tartaria, whose history has supposedly been completely wiped clean. According to this theory, all these ornate, old stone buildings you find across America are actually remnants of this Tartarian civilization. And the idea is that when the Mormon pioneers got to Utah in 1847, they didn't build their city from scratch. No, instead they found and reclaimed these incredible ancient structures.
And all of this brings the entire theory right into the present day, with the final, pretty startling claim that a fifth temple is being built as we speak, fulfilling what the source calls the true prophetic count.
So here's the revised count, according to the source. After Herod's third temple comes the fourth one, the Salt Lake Temple, which they claim was just found and finished by the Mormon pioneers. And if you follow that logic, it means we are now watching the construction of the fifth temple. The people who believe this point to the 2020 earthquake in Salt Lake City as this huge prophetic event. They say it triggered a complete reconstruction of the temple from the foundation up. And they highlight the insane amount of rebar being used, suggesting it's being built to survive a future prophesied cataclysm. And this really captures the whole takeaway from the source material. The argument ends on this idea that we're living in a time of apocalypse, not meaning destruction, but in its original Greek sense, an unveiling, a time where hidden truths are supposedly being revealed. Which, of course, leaves us with the final question. What, if anything, do you think is being unveiled?